So most years I begin this part of the exercise with a clever play, or what I think is a clever play on the word charge, like you probably thought you were through with charges from the law school. Given economic conditions, though, I'm going to play that quip down this year, although I couldn't resist making it. In any event, today's charge has a different meaning and a different purpose, for as we confer your degree, we entrust you with a task and charge you with a responsibility. The task and the responsibility are actually straightforward and can be simply stated. We charge you to use your training well and to make a difference for the better. The world today faces an array of seemingly insurmountable problems, and that's not just boilerplate commencement talk. Things feel different, to me at least. The number of serious problems seems greater, and the most daunting of these problems seems more daunting, certainly than at any time in my life. Whatever side of the political divide you're on, challenges like terrorism, energy, healthcare, the national debt, joblessness, and more are huge. And they require a seriousness of purpose and a willingness to take action that the world's current political leadership seems unable to muster. So you must do better. Fortunately, if history teaches anything, it's that great challenges bring great opportunities, which means you leave here with opportunities to make a difference that are, in fact, truly rare. Rise to the challenge. Be ambitious, take chances, do something that makes the world a better, safer place. I want you to appreciate that as lawyers, you enter a guild uniquely qualified to make this kind of difference. Popular skepticism about the contribution our profession makes to society is, for better or worse, a long-standing historical fact. In some circles, ironically though not surprisingly, those most needing legal constraint, that skepticism often slips into outright contempt. Yet the fact is that lawyers provide and have always provided a staggeringly disproportionate share of the leadership in this country. Of our 44 presidents, 26 or 60% have been lawyers, and lawyers typically constitute more than half the Senate and a third of the House. 29 of 50 governors today are lawyers. We do a little less well in state legislatures, where only 17% are lawyers, but maybe that explains something. Recently, I read that 14 of the Fortune 100 companies are led by lawyers, which, when you think about it, compares pretty favorably to the mere 33 who are MBAs. One study reports that 10% of CEOs in general are lawyers by training. More broadly, lawyers have been leaders in virtually every important social and political movement in American history, from the Revolution to abolition, progressivism, the New Deal, feminism, civil rights, and more. The same is true throughout much of the rest of the world as well. This preeminence in leadership by the legal profession happens for many reasons. It exists in part because law defines the boundaries for nearly everything we do, both personal and public. Indeed, law is the primary means by which public policy is expressed and implemented. And people who lack legal training are afraid of the law, or rather, afraid of what they don't know and don't know how to find for themselves. Lay people experience law something like Joseph K. in the trial, as a bewildering, capricious force that can control their fate and before which they feel helpless. But unlike Joseph K., who you may recall let the authorities execute him without ever knowing quite why, they turn to lawyers, that is, to people like you, to protect them. Sometimes I think the main thing we do here in law school is not teach you the law, because to be honest, you don't really know that much law yet. Rather, you will more after the bar, but we teach you how not to fear the law by helping you to develop informed intuitions about what the law is likely to be and to have confidence in the dependability of your intuitions, along with the know-how to find out for sure. But there's more to it than that. I think lawyers make natural leaders because of other aspects of legal training, things you will have learned and hopefully internalized during your time here. So, for example, many people think of lawyers as controversy producers. But legal training, in fact, inculcates values that are critical to finding workable solutions where there is conflict and disagreement. This includes ethical commitments that you must make part of your professional as well as your personal identity. And it includes a distinctive care in thinking through problems, like making sure you know the facts and this means all the facts, not just those that support your position, before reaching a conclusion or giving advice. Today, however, I want to focus on a particular habit of mind that is central to being an effective lawyer, but too seldom emphasized. Namely, understanding that when people disagree, there always are arguments on both sides, and people on both sides genuinely believe their point of view to be both reasonable and right. It's a grave mistake, and one I hope you will not make, to assume that people who disagree with you really know that they are wrong and you are right, but have some evil or self-interested motive for pretending otherwise. No attitude is more destructive because it impedes the process of compromise and accommodation that is indispensable in a free society. I've singled out this quality of reasoned empathy because I think it has never been more important or more absent than today. We live in an age of ideology, a time when, for too many of our political leaders, facts and the interpretation of facts seem to be determined and controlled by pre-existing ideological commitments rather than the reverse. You see this all around you, in the politicization of evidence, in the way elected officials dismiss research that conflicts with their preconceived beliefs by attributing conclusions they don't like to political or corrupt motivations. We see it in the emergence and now dominance of media with overt political agendas, and the growing audience these media attract as people confine themselves to information sources that dependably tell them what they already want to hear. We see it in the increasing willingness of office holders to say what is convenient without actually caring in the slightest whether or not it is true. Most worrisome, we see it in the perpetual campaign that now passes for governing. It used to be that once an election was over, political advisors moved to the sidelines. There was breathing space between elections, time for politicians from both parties to leave the grandstands for a while at least. Political concerns were never completely absent, obviously, but they were seen as separate and distinct and were often distinctly secondary. That's no longer true. The distinction between policy and politics has collapsed. What is true seems increasingly to have become what those who share an ideology want to be true. Nor for anyone who thinks that I am talking only about conservatives or only about liberals is this tendency confined to one side or the other. In our current political culture, it pervades civil discourse, reflecting a change in the culture itself. Nor for the international students am I speaking only about the United States. Democratic politics is failing. And one reason it has stopped working is that critical mediators of disagreement, namely evidence and experience, have practically ceased to matter. Too many people care about them only as tools to manipulate. Too many people embrace dogmas of one sort or another that tell them all they need. Evidence that challenges their beliefs is ignored or avoided or dismissed as a product of wrong-headed self-interest. Okay, I want to switch gears for a moment, but before I do, I need to make a brief confession. I think I am fairly well-read in general. I do. But when it comes to poetry, I'm embarrassingly ignorant. I don't get it. I can't read it. I can't understand it. And it's an inability that has often been a source, I should say, of considerable amusement to my wife and some of my more literary friends. Probably all of my more literary friends, only some of them let me know. I mention this because I'm about to quote from an attempt to interpret a poem, and I don't want to mislead anyone into thinking that I have this sort of material always or easily at hand. The poem is At the Fish Houses by Elizabeth Bishop, and I'm familiar with it because I heard a recording of her reading it on an NPR broadcast I listened to recently while driving home from work. It's a beautiful poem with some surprising turns. Most of the poem describes a scene of an old man sitting by a fish house in New England at the end of the day, netting his net and waiting for a herring boat to come in. Near the end, Bishop shifts perspective to focus on the sea, which in the twilight, she says, seems suspended above the rounded gray and blue-gray stones found at the water's edge. If you should dip your hand in, your wrist would ache immediately, your bones would begin to ache, and your hand would burn, as if the water were a transmutation of fire that feeds on stones and burns with a dark gray flame. If you tasted it, it would taste first bitter, then briny, then surely burn your tongue. It's a lovely rendering of a familiar if unpleasant experience, the disagreeable taste of seawater, the way icy water can burn. But then Bishop finishes with another twist, this one more unexpected and for that reason more startling. She says of the sea, "It is like what we imagine knowledge to be, dark, salt, clear, moving, utterly free, drawn from the cold, hard mouth of the world, derived from the rocky breasts, forever flowing and drawn, and since our knowledge is historical, flowing and flown." It's an arresting metaphor. I was sufficiently struck when I heard it that I actually pulled over to the side of the road to think, and then raced home to read the text, which I found on poemhunter.com. Because I wanted to understand why the passage struck such a chord with me. The reason, I think, is how apt Bishop's analogy is for you today. Because when I heard the broadcast, I was actually thinking about what I wanted to say here to you as we send you off. These are rich passages, filled with potential meanings, not all of which I can discuss, and some of which I'm sure I'm missing. But Bishop's main thrust seems clear enough. Knowledge comes from the world, like the ocean, which is drawn from the cold, hard mouth of the world, derived from the rocky breasts. Knowledge is not whatever we want it to be, not something we can control or make to suit our convenience. It is clear, moving, utterly free, forever flowing and drawn. I puzzled over the word drawn. What does Bishop mean that knowledge is not just flowing, but also drawn? She could mean it is like the sea drawn by outside forces, as the sea is drawn by the gravity of the moon. But then it would not be utterly free. I think she means it's drawn by someone, drawn by us. We extract knowledge from the world of cold, hard facts, an excavation project that requires effort. Knowledge is out there in the world, but we must find and draw upon it. And that's not easy, for our knowledge is historical. Unlike the restless sea, we can only ever stand in one place at one time. From our perspective, then, knowledge, like the ocean, is not only forever flowing, it is also forever flown. The lessons of the past are past. An intelligent life, a life that draws on the knowledge that nature and experience make available to us, requires a continual process of renewal and rediscovery of what we think we know and of the knowledge we need. But recall what Bishop said about the ocean. If you should dip your hand in, your wrist would ache immediately and your hand would burn. If you tasted it, it would first taste bitter, then briny, then surely burn your tongue. This process of renewal, of drawing upon what lessons the world makes available to us is hard, for knowledge can burn and taste bitter. And that's true, don't you think? Challenging your beliefs can be hard. Changing your mind is definitely hard, which is why people do it so seldom. Knowing when to change your mind, knowing when a cherished belief remains valid and when not, can be the hardest thing of all, especially when that belief is shared by your friends and allies and they expect you to stay with the program. I can't tell you how to make these decisions. All I can say is this: you must be relentlessly, and I mean relentlessly, honest with yourself. Self-delusion is easy, and no one is better at it than a well-trained lawyer. A good advocate first persuades him or herself, after all, and lawyers quickly grow comfortable with the process. It becomes all too simple to convince yourself that what is easy is also what is best. Sometimes, moreover, that will be true. What is easy will be best, and what you want to be true will be true. But the only way to know for sure is to listen to what experience and evidence tell you, even if it tastes bitter or burns, because it's not what you wanted to hear. And if after you do so, there is a quiet nagging voice in the back of your mind, and you'll know it when you hear it, listen, be honest, and remember George's sage advice to walk a few steps down the road and look back at yourself. I say all this with certainty in your future, confident that you will do better than we have done. You are all amazing, I mean that. Impressive, passionate, brilliant, tall. Surprising in many ways every day. As I know I've said to some of you before, the admissions process can become downright humbling when I compare you to myself at the same age. It's a privilege to have been your teacher and advisor, and I know I speak for everyone on the faculty when I say that. As dean, I spend a great deal of time with alumni, with the students of the past. I see the countless different ways in which they have gone on to do remarkable, impressive things. I get to hear firsthand the countless different ways in which they have surpassed us, their former teachers. I love that our graduates go on to surpass us. Love even more that the time they spent here played an important role in shaping who they became and what they accomplished. We get you now, while you're still young, still forming values and ideals and making plans that will shape your future. The privilege of teaching is the privilege of being able to have a role in that process. You are the remarkable alumni of the future. And I, along with everyone else here, can't wait to see what you do. Thank you.